Good evening, everyone. This is our Shaping Guelph Official Plan Review, Official Plan Amendment 80 Open House. We'll just be starting in a moment. Good evening, everyone. This is our Shaping Guelph Official Plan Review Open House. My name is Susan Hall, and I'll be your facilitator this evening. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who are joining us by computer or tablet, your camera is off and all of our attendees are muted. We are welcoming folks to ask questions of our panelists using the Q&A button on your screen. So that should be down at the bottom, and the raise the hand feature as well, which is just a little hand symbol down at the bottom. If you have some questions, we're going to have time for question and answer after our presentation. I just wanted to let folks know that the session is also being recorded and live streamed through the city channels. You could go to the next slide. Great. So before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we meet virtually this evening. So as we gather, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on the treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabeg peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. So before we go to the agenda, again, I just wanted to remind folks you're welcome to raise your hand if you've got some questions, or put a question in the Q&A function, and we'll get to those when we get to our discussion portion. Our agenda this evening is an overview of planning in Ontario, a brief recap of that, Guelph's official plan review, the policy summaries by chapter that you can review, and we'll share next steps towards the end of the session. So before we begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce the team who are here from the city this evening. And I'll just ask each of them to unmute and say hello. So Melissa Aldonate is the Manager of Policy Planning and Urban Design.
Good evening, everyone.
And Jason Downham is a planner with the city.
Good evening, everyone.
And we have Kelly Guthrie, who is a community engagement and our host this evening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
And we have Leah Leffler, who is an environmental planner with the city.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Peter Ryder, who is the manager of Source Water Protection Program.
Good evening, everyone.
And then from the Lura team, our team is involved in the community engagement aspects of the project. So I have James Knott.
Hi, everybody.
And Cyan Sivenson.
Hi, everyone.
And again, my name's Susan. So we'll begin with the presentation, and then, as I said, we'll have time for some question and answers following the presentation. So Jason, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Susan. So I wanted to start tonight by providing sort of a high-level overview of the planning system in Ontario, the function and purpose of an official plan, and why we're currently updating our official plan. So this slide shows the hierarchy of planning documents that shape the planning system in Ontario. And we start at the top with the Planning Act, which is provincial legislation that sets out the ground rules for land use planning in Ontario. It describes how lands may be controlled and who may control them. It's basically the rule book for planning in Ontario. Next in the hierarchy of all of the provincial policy documents, direct municipalities to integrate matters of provincial interest into their municipal planning decisions. And one of those documents is the Provincial Policy Statement, or PPS, which contains the province's policies on land use planning that guide municipal decision making, and all municipal decisions on land use planning matters shall be consistent with the PPS. The current PPS came into effect on May 1st of 2020. The growth plan is another example of a provincial policy document that is intended to guide growth and development in a way that supports complete communities and promotes better and more efficient use of our existing infrastructure. We've been having conversations since 2019 about how the city should grow to conform to the latest provincial growth plan called A Place to Grow. The next document in that hierarchy is the Municipal Official Plan. And this is prepared by municipalities and is a legal planning document that's required by the Planning Act. It provides the policy direction to manage future land use patterns and growth locally within the municipality, and the official plan must conform or be consistent with all provincial policy documents. And a zoning bylaw is a tool municipalities have to implement the policies of the official plan. And this bylaw contains more detailed and specific development requirements that are legally enforceable, provides regulations on more precise land uses, such as where movie theaters, restaurants, or gas stations may be permitted, and any required standards such as the number of required parking spaces, building sizes, and where it could be located on that property. So what exactly is an official plan? Well, an official plan is a legal planning document that is required by the Planning Act, as I mentioned previously. It does establish a vision for the future of a municipality and provides policy direction to manage future land use patterns and growth. An official plan primarily deals with how land can be used, for example, whether it should be for houses, industry, office, commercial uses, parks, natural areas, or even perhaps a mix of some of those uses. And what services like roads, sewers, parks, and schools are needed, and when and in what order parts of the municipality will grow. So why exactly do we need an official plan? Well, the official plan for a municipality ensures that the sequence of growth in the city happens in a coordinated, logical, and orderly manner. This ensures that services are extended to new growth areas in a more cost-efficient manner. It helps communicate how land in the city can be used, and also provides the foundation for the zoning bylaw, which contains the regulations that implement the policies of the official plan. And it also ensures that all local decisions follow the policies of the plan. So why should we review our official plan? Well, in short, it's because we're required to review the official plan every 5 years under the Planning Act. And the last comprehensive review of the official plan was concluded in 2017. And when OPA 80 is brought to council for approval later this year, it will have been 5 years since the last approval of our 5-year review. There have also been a number of changes to provincial legislation, provincial policies, and plans over the past few years, which do require that the official plan be reviewed and updated in order for it to conform or be consistent with those updated provincial documents. And certain legislation, such as the Places to Grow Act, may also require the municipalities update their official plans in order to meet certain legislated timelines. So for the next part of this presentation, I wanted to highlight some of the specific changes we are proposing to Guelph's official plan. And if you'd like to review any of this in greater detail, the document is available on our website at guelph.ca/official plan. As I've alluded to previously, the policy updates that form part of the official plan review are being triggered by the release of a new provincial growth plan in 2019 called A Place to Grow, amendments to the Planning Act, the Clean Water Act, and changes to the provincial policy statement. This review will also implement the recommendations and findings of the growth management strategy that was just released this past January. It contains some important additional changes to policy to improve clarity or to align our policies with recently approved city plans or council decisions. And there's also some routine housekeeping changes to update policy numbers or names of provincial ministries that may have changed since the last review. And I'll go into more detail about all of these changes later in the presentation. So here's a high-level generalized overview of our project timeline for this review. We began in October 2019 with a project initiation report to council, followed by a kickoff event in early 2020 with guest speakers who highlighted some of the principles of good planning and ways we can help to make cities more livable. Between then and April 2021, we spent our time continuing to engage with the community about where and how to grow, and prepared several background studies in response to the feedback received during that engagement, which included an updated vision for Guelph's future growth, deployment land strategy, a housing analysis and strategy, and a residential intensification analysis, all of which served as background to our growth management strategy. And then in April of 2021, we released 3 different scenarios for growth and asked for feedback from the community. We also released a policy paper that following month that discussed all the policies of the official plan that were proposed to be updated to address those changes to provincial policies and legislation. And then in late 2021, we did select a preferred scenario for growth, which formed the foundation of the growth management strategy, which I mentioned was presented to council in January of this last year. And then last month, we released the draft official plan amendment 80, which incorporates all those policy changes. And this is where we are right now in the process. And then next week on Wednesday, March 30th, we will be bringing the draft official plan to council as part of a legislative public meeting, and then back to council in July for a decision on adopting the official plan policies before we send it off to the province, who is the official approval authority on this official plan review. And next, I'll be getting to sort of the summary of some of the updates by chapter of the official plan. Chapter 2 of the city's official plan sets out the vision, mission, guiding principles, and strategic goals for future growth of the city. Chapter 2's vision is proposed to be updated to be consistent with what we heard through consultation early on in the project. And this vision was approved by council in June of 2020 and will set the direction for the official plan to 2051. It includes statements recognizing that Guelph is a diverse community that is growing and welcoming new people and businesses. The vision will set the foundation for planning for a full range and mix of housing with the goal of making housing accessible and affordable. The vision promotes that Guelph will continue to have a variety of places to shop, work, provide for opportunities to explore open spaces and parks in a thoughtfully designed, compact, and complete community. The vision recognizes the important values of the community and directs that we will embrace, protect, and maintain the features that are valued by Guelph's residents, such as our cultural heritage resources and natural heritage system. The vision also sets out how we will manage Guelph's land use patterns that shape the city's social, economic, cultural, and natural environments, and creates a strong foundation that will guide the future growth of Guelph. And in 2051, our Guelph is a place we are proud to call home, and we're proud because we have worked together to shape its future. Chapter 2 is also proposed to be updated to recognize the thousands of years of rich Indigenous people's history on the lands where Guelph is situated today. It's proposed to set out policies that recognize the existing treaty rights of the Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada to be consistent with Section 35 of the Federal Constitution Act, and sets out commitments that we will continue to engage with Indigenous communities and to help facilitate some of that knowledge sharing. Those commitments to engage with the Indigenous communities are set out as follows: that we will maintain a process for notification and engagement that reflects and respects Indigenous governance and decision-making roles over land use planning, that we will engage and collaborate with Indigenous governments on the shared responsibility to sustain the lands, waters, and resources for the benefit of generations to come. We'll also consider the interests of Indigenous governments during engagement on cultural heritage and archaeological resources. And this approach will see the city engage with Indigenous governments on all land use planning matters, including development review process, land use planning studies, environmental assessments, and policy reviews. I will be spending some time over the next month or so consulting on our draft official plan amendment, and as part of that consultation, we will be engaging with Indigenous communities. Chapter 3, Planning a Complete and Healthy Community, is a section that is largely about implementing the goals and objectives of the growth plan in the context of Guelph. It contains a lot of the policies around managing growth to 2051, including population and employment forecasts, density targets, intensification targets, and policies around the urban structure of the community. Our proposed updates to this chapter include policies for the updated urban structure that contains strategic growth areas and their new respective density targets, and adding new employment area policies. This section also sets the overall citywide population employment forecasts of 208,000 people and 116,000 jobs by 2051. And here's our proposed schedule depicting our urban structure, which shows the location of our built-up area here in purple, the designated greenfield area in the beige color, our downtown and major transit station area towards the middle of the schedule, and our strategic growth areas shown in red, which will be the focus for a lot of our future mixed-use development to 2051. The intensification target is also proposed to be updated, and we will now be planning for 46% of all new residential units to be constructed in the existing built-up area of the city, and this represents an increase from 40% in the current official plan. The greenfield density target is also updated to be a target of 68 residents and jobs per hectare, which is an increase from 50 residents and jobs per hectare today. And the planned downtown density targets for 2031 will remain at 150 residents and jobs per hectare. Because we're planning for a significant amount of future growth within our downtown, we are proposing to introduce an updated target of 175 residents and jobs per hectare by 2041 and 200 residents and jobs per hectare by 2051. Our proposed employment policies will introduce a citywide density target of 40 jobs per hectare across all of our employment areas. And density targets for the employment land uses are proposed to be set at 36 jobs per hectare for industrial designations. And this designation generally includes uses such as manufacturing and warehousing, 70 jobs per hectare for the corporate business park designation, which are employment designations intended for research and development facilities and office uses. And these are a bit more employee dense. And then 50 jobs per hectare for the institutional research park designation, which is a designation reserved for the University of Guelph Research Park located along Stone Road. And then here is our proposed employment area schedule, which also shows our provincially significant employment zone in the southwest corner of the city that recognizes the significance of those employment areas, provides additional long-term protection for the employment uses on those lands. The employment areas are the majority of the lands that are designated industrial, corporate business park, and institutional research park in the city. Chapter 4 of the official plan, Protecting What is Valuable, addresses the features, resources, and built form characteristics of the city that are highly valued and essential to the protection of the natural and cultural heritage resources that ensure the health and safety and enhance energy sustainability and enhance the quality of life within the city. So in this chapter, there are proposed updates to the policies for a natural heritage system, water resource system, source water protection, and the policies around climate change as well. And I'll get into these changes in a bit more in depth in the following slides. There are also a few policies proposed for hazardous forest types associated with wildland fire. And these policies respond to changes to the provincial policy statement and will generally direct development away from those hazardous forest types where risk cannot be mitigated in accordance with the wildland fire assessment and mitigation standards. There are updates to the environmental assessment policies to provide better clarity and direction for those municipal projects that require environmental assessments. There are updates to the urban forest policies for consistency with the city's private tree protection bylaw and consistency with other sections of the OP and to reflect the completion of the city's tree technical manual. There will also be some housekeeping and general policy updates to be consistent with the city's existing advisory committees, updated reference to the provincial government and associated ministries and agencies to reflect their current roles and responsibilities, and other general updates to improve clarity and readability. And I'll get into some of these more specific policies updates over the coming slides. And the updates to the natural heritage system will include revised names, some updates to policies and definitions associated with some of the significant natural areas to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, to align with current agency approaches, or to reflect the addition of the water resource system policies. And much of these proposed changes are to address provincial updates associated with the habitat of endangered and threatened species, and also the surface water features and fish habitat. It should also be noted that none of the proposed modifications to the natural heritage system or to Chapter 4 reflect a change to the current level of protection of significant natural areas that form part of our natural heritage system, and there are no proposed changes to the level of protection for trees in the city either. And the environmental assessment policies were updated to improve clarity. And in addition to ensuring that there will be no negative impact to the natural heritage features as a result of city infrastructure improvements, there will also be the requirement that there is a net ecological gain to the natural heritage features and areas when municipal works are conducted. And here is the proposed natural heritage system schedule, which includes some minor updates to the system. And updated policies to ensure the long-term protection of the city's water resource system are based on the requirements of the Source Protection Plan and Clean Water Act. This proposes to protect our water quality and quantity and may require alternative development approaches in order to ensure that. It includes updates to the watershed plan and sub-watershed study policies that will require us to map the water resource system, that will inform the land use planning process, that will evaluate and prepare the impacts of a changing climate, and to identify necessary restrictions on development to protect municipal drinking water supplies, protect, improve, or restore the water resource system, and to sustain natural ecosystems. New definitions are also added to be consistent with provincial requirements as well. And the city of Guelph is reliant on our groundwater for drinking water, and therefore the Source Protection Plan is a significant plan for Guelph, as it really focuses on the importance of protecting the sources of our drinking water. Guelph source water protection policies are part of the Grand River Source Protection Plan, which is a plan that establishes the policies and programs for managing significant drinking water threats. This amendment will implement the policies of the Source Protection Plan, which includes restricting certain land uses and activities that risk contaminating our groundwater resources. And we're proposing to add 2 new schedules to our official plan, which identify wellheads in the city and the lands around them that are subject to policies to protect and manage the quality of our drinking water from a land use perspective. And here is our proposed Schedule 7A, which is our wellhead protection areas that shows the different policy areas around each wellhead with the goal of protecting our drinking water. And here is our proposed Schedule 7B, which is our issue contributing areas that show areas where management measures are in place to ensure that the drinking water continues to be viable into the future. The policies addressing climate change are to align with the energy conservation and climate change policies of the provincial policy statement to mitigate the risks to public health and safety and property damage from natural hazards that will become a city that is more resilient to climate change by addressing those impacts of a changing climate. The changes are also to align with the city's community energy initiative. And that community energy initiative includes some updated targets to achieve a net zero carbon neutral community and to achieve 100% of the city's energy consumed through renewable resources by 2050. Next up is Chapter 9, which covers the policy updates for land uses. And changes to land use policies are largely to implement the growth management strategy in order to conform with the provincial growth plan, A Place to Grow. Now, there are also changes stemming from the York Elizabeth land use study and updates to the Planning Act and provincial policy statement. And here's our proposed Schedule 2, our land use schedule, that shows the location of all the land uses in the city and also includes all the proposed land use designation changes that will help implement the growth management strategy and help contribute to achieving our vision. Now, in terms of changes to the land use policy section of our official plan, all references to height and density bonusing provisions have all been removed from the plan in accordance with the recent amendments to the Planning Act, which requires municipalities to remove the ability, for example, for a builder to construct additional building height or increase the density of their development beyond what is normally permitted if that builder provides some sort of public benefit to the community, such as public art, or perhaps a contribution to a community center. We're also proposing to remove the low density greenfield residential designation and combine it with the low density residential designation. And this is to help make the land use schedule a bit easier to read and interpret. And there are some proposed height and density changes for this designation as well that I'll get into on the next slide. Next, the mixed use corridor designation is proposed to be split into two new designations titled Mixed Use Corridor 1 and Mixed Use Corridor 2. This change is occurring to allow for increased heights and densities within portions of the existing mixed-use corridor designation where appropriate. Generally, the larger properties with fewer issues of compatibility and transition between height and density to the surrounding land uses will be designated as mixed-use corridor 1, which will allow for those taller buildings and higher densities. And properties that may have issues with the transition between height and density to surrounding land uses will retain their existing height and density permissions and be designated as mixed-use corridor 2. And I'll also get into more of the specifics around the height and density changes on the following slide as well. We're also proposing to add a new designation that recognizes portions of the Rolling Hills Estate subdivision in the southeast corner of the city, where there are existing estate-style residences and where redevelopment may not be possible due to the natural heritage system, or where municipal services are not anticipated to be extended. And we're also proposing to amend the height and density policies for certain designations within our strategic growth areas in order to encourage higher densities and taller buildings to be focused within areas of the city that will be more efficient, that will make more efficient use of our infrastructure. This chart here helps break down a lot of the changes to our land use policy section of the official plan. And most of those changes are to the height and density policies that address what we've heard through consultation over the past 2 years. So first, in our commercial mixed-use center designation, which are generally our major retail mixed-use nodes towards the edges of the city, such as at Clare and Gordon, at Woodlawn and Woolwich, in the West End at Paisley and Elmira with the grocery stores. We're proposing that maximum building heights be increased from 10 to 14 stories within our strategic growth areas, and allowing for increased densities to 250 units per hectare from the 150 units per hectare permitted today. I touched on some of the changes to our mixed-use corridor designation on the previous slide, which is being proposed to be split into two designations, mixed-use corridor 1 and mixed-use corridor 2. This designation generally applies to some of the major retail and mixed-use areas that are a bit closer to the center of the city, such as along Stone Road, which includes the mall, along Aramosa Road with the grocery stores, and along Silver Creek, where Willow West Mall exists. And the mixed-use corridor 1 designation will allow up to 14 stories within the Stone Road and Silver Creek strategic growth areas, which is an increase from the current 6 stories, and up to 250 units per hectare, which would be an increase from the current maximum of 150 units per hectare. The remaining areas designated mixed-use corridor 1 are proposed to allow up to 10 stories, which is an increase from 6 stories today. And the mixed-use corridor 2 designation is proposed to retain the same permissions as the existing mixed-use corridor designation today, which is up to 6 stories and 150 units per hectare. High-density residential is also proposed to remain, this largely proposed to remain the same at 10 stories and maximum 150 units per hectare, except where high-density residential designations fall within a strategic growth area. And where that designation falls within a strategic growth area, high-density residential sites will be permitted to a maximum of 250 units per hectare. Now, the maximum building heights and densities in the low-density greenfield residential designation is currently 6 stories and up to a maximum of 100 units per hectare through bonusing, and is now proposed to be to permit buildings to a maximum of 4 stories and 6 units per hectare within designated greenfield areas. In the built-up area, developments are currently permitted up to 6 stories and 100 units per hectare through bonusing along major roads, but is now proposed to be permitted to a maximum of 3 stories and 35 units per hectare, or up to 60 units per hectare as of right along roads designated as arterials. The proposed changes to our low-density residential designation came in response to what we heard through consultation, and will also serve the purpose of helping to concentrate some of those taller and higher density developments in areas where we can better accommodate that height and density, such as in our downtown or in our strategic growth areas, while still allowing for some smaller infill developments to allow for that better mix of housing. So as I mentioned earlier, we're also updating our land use section of the official plan because the York Elizabeth land use study was completed and approved in 2021, and all the land use recommendations from that study are now proposed to be implemented through this review. And there are lands that are proposed to be redesignated and some policy updates to the mixed business designation that will allow it to be more compatible with the surrounding land uses. Currently, our mixed use business largely only permits industrial type uses, but it is being proposed to also allow for additional uses such as some commercial uses, offices, tourism related uses such as hotels, restaurants, and gas bars, and also to encourage entrepreneurial and incubator businesses. And here are some of the land use changes towards the western portion of the York Elizabeth land use study area, where we're proposing to extend the mixed use business designation to align with the property lines and also include a few of the businesses on the south side of York Road into a mixed office commercial designation to recognize the existing uses. And in the eastern portion of the study area, the service commercial designation in the top here, this red area, and portions of the industrial designation are proposed to be redesignated to mixed business, medium density residential to allow for some residential development, and mixed office commercial to recognize some of the existing uses here towards the eastern end. It should also be noted that it was identified that the natural area overlay, which is the striped area in the top image, depicting the natural area overlay, has been removed following further study, as was determined that that feature did not meet the criteria for inclusion within the natural heritage system. And as many of you may be aware, the Dolime Quarry lands on the west side of Guelph were recently approved by the province to be annexed into the city of Guelph. And as a result, we must now consider those lands as part of our long-term housing supply. Due to a number of studies that will be required to be done on the lands before they can be approved for development, we're proposing that they be designated as a special study area with policies that will require a secondary plan and environmental impact study to be completed. And that secondary plan will consider the future land use in those lands, which is proposed to be largely residential, and that also that the natural heritage system policies will apply. And that secondary plan on the Dolime Quarry lands will address relevant planning and technical considerations prior to allowing development. And here are the proposed land uses for the Dolime Quarry lands. And the area in blue represents the extent of the special study area designation here. Chapter 10, the implementation section of the official plan, lays out the various tools and mechanisms that the city can use to achieve the vision, goals, and objectives of the official plan. It includes policies that direct which matters of the official plan will be monitored to assess the effectiveness of the plan. It includes policies around development phasing and prioritization of community improvements, direction on how to implement applicable portions of the official plan through bylaws, development control measures such as site plan control. It lays out development consultation and complete application requirements, and also includes policies on public engagement. Now, two of the noteworthy updates to the implementation section of the plan are to remove the height and density bonusing policies in accordance with the updated Planning Act. And the other is to update the complete application requirements that apply to development applications to be consistent with the provincial policy and also the Grand River Source Protection Plan. The city also has two approved secondary plans that are currently in effect, the Downtown Secondary Plan and the Guelph Innovation District. And some of the policies that apply to these two secondary plan areas are also needed to be updated to align with the changes of the Planning Act and also to aid in the implementation of the growth management strategy. So much like we've talked about for other sections of the official plan, the policies for height and density bonusing that were allowed in portions of the downtown have been deleted in accordance with the recent updates to the Planning Act that no longer allow for that. The Downtown Secondary Plan also currently plans for a density target of 150 residents and jobs per hectare by 2031. And as I mentioned previously, we're also looking to update that to plan for 175 residents and jobs per hectare by 2041 and 200 residents and jobs per hectare by 2051. And in the absence of height and density bonusing policies, we're now recommending that certain existing height permissions be allowed to be increased by an additional 2 stories, as seen in the table on the screen. to help achieve the downtown density targets and also goals of the growth management strategy. And within the Guelph Innovation District secondary plan, again, we're also proposing to remove the height and density bonusing policies, and also policies that reference the anticipated timing for development of the Guelph Innovation District have also been updated. We're also proposing to make changes to our glossary section, and most of the updates to this section include defined terms that are used in the plan to be consistent with provincial policies or provincial legislation, or to help improve clarity. And there are some definitions that are no longer applicable and have been completely removed from the plan. And the last section of our official plan contains the schedules. These are maps that form part of the official plan and provide some of those visual representations to help understand where certain policies apply. For example, the land use schedule, as we saw earlier, helps to identify which land use policies apply to certain areas of the city. Now, some of the updates to the schedules include the updated city boundary to accommodate the recently approved annexation of the Dolan quarry lands on the western edge of the city. There is a new Schedule 1A, as we saw earlier, that depicts the urban structure of the city. There is also a new Schedule 1B that will show the employment areas of the city. We are proposing to update Schedule 2, which is the land use schedule, which will be used to implement the recommendations of the growth management strategy, and the natural heritage strategy schedules 4 and 4A through 4E were also updated to reflect refinements to the natural heritage system, along with some additional changes to Schedule 4B to reflect some terminology changes. So next up, I would like to walk us through the next steps in the project. So we have an upcoming legislative public meeting of council next Wednesday, March 30th at 6 p.m. Consultation will be occurring throughout the rest of the month of April, including engaging with those Indigenous communities, as I mentioned earlier. Following the consultation, we will be conducting a review of all the comments and feedback received and make any necessary adjustments to our policies. And lastly, a recommendation report that is scheduled to go to council for adoption on July 11th, after which the official plan will be sent off to the province for final approval. Now, at this stage, I would like to open this up to any questions or comments on today's presentation. Please use the Q&A submit function on your screen or raise your hand feature available to you if you prefer to speak. Alternatively, we're also collecting written comments and questions on the draft official plan amendment on Have Your Say platform, the details of which will be available on some coming slides. So I might stop sharing right now while we move towards the comments and question period.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So as Jason said, we now have time for some questions. You can either type them into the Q&A. You should be able to see, for those of you on WebEx, the Q&A button in the bottom right hand of the screen. And I know a few of you have been typing questions in as we go. Also, you can raise your hand to ask a question. To find that, again, at the bottom right, you should see a participants button. For those of you on WebEx, you can click that button and hopefully you'll be able to see a hand icon next to your hand to raise your hand to indicate that that you can ask questions. I apologize to everyone that our cameras are not on. We're working on that to get our cameras back on. Something the option is missing, so apologies about that. I don't see any hands up, so I'll be watching for the hands for those of you who raised hands, and Susan will be monitoring questions in the Q&A. So Susan, perhaps we can start with a couple from the Q&A, please.
Sure, sounds good, James. So the first one is from Morgan, and we covered a little bit of this in the presentation, but I'll just ask the team to confirm. So the question is, the increase to the 208,000 for 2051 was due to doe lime, and where is that represented in the plan? So Jason,
Yeah,
if you
I
could
can take
highlight.
that, Susan. Yeah, so the growth plan originally directed us to plan for a population of 203,000 people. And following that, with the annexation of the doe-lime lands and requiring us to incorporate those lands into our long-term housing supply, we increased our population forecast to 208,000 people, and that's all reflected in Chapter 3 of our official plan. It's all stated there. I hope that gets to Morgan's question.
Great, thanks, Jason. Morgan, hopefully that answers your question and refers you to the right section of the plan. If you have further ones, you're welcome to raise your hand or put it in the Q&A again. James, I'll keep going. We had a couple other ones in the chat. So Alex had asked, during the discussion leading to the council vote on designating the cultural heritage features on the reformatory lands, staff took the position that the official plan would have to be amended to permit a designation under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. I have been unable to find any proposed amendments in that regard, and am I missing something? So the link to the Heritage Act piece. And Melissa? Oh, there we go. We have cameras. Yay.
Thanks for your question, Alex. And yes, in the conversation around the designation of the Ontario Reformatory, we did advise Council that should we proceed to a Heritage Conservation District for that area, that we would be required to amend our official plan to update the policies within the secondary plan that relate to the block plan areas and the requirements for studies to be completed during the block plan. So those amendments would be considered at the time that Council approves a Heritage Conservation District for the Ontario Reformatory and not before. So that's why it's not considered through our overall official plan review.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And Alex, does that answer your question? If you have a sort of further piece to that, feel free to raise your hand, or you can post in the Q&A. Okay, so I don't hear further one from Alex at the moment. Maurizio had to run, but just asked if we're able to see a copy of the presentation and download it. And Kelly, thank you for responding before Maurizio had to go. The presentation will be posted on Guelph.ca tomorrow, and the recording of this session will also be available. So for those who are not able to participate the whole time this evening, you can check it out there. Okay, follow-up question from Morgan. Is the plan expected to be approved by the new provincial government in advance of the municipal election? So Melissa or Jason?
I'll take that one. We are required to have Council adopt the official plan review prior to submitting to the province for their approval. Unfortunately, we do not know the timing of the provincial review or when the province would provide us with a decision on that official plan amendment. So I can't confirm when we would have that and if it would be prior to the municipal election.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Another question in the Q&A from Morgan. Is doe lime then expected to be the final area of the current boundaries to be developed? So a follow-up from the earlier doe lime question.
So in terms of timing of development, we don't set out timing of when Doe Lime is expected to be developed or if it would be the final area to be developed. We haven't gone into that specificity in terms of phasing policies. We do have study requirements to put it into land use designations for development though.
Thanks, Melissa. And a reminder to anyone, if you would like to raise your hand, by all means, please do feel welcome to do so. And you can find that in the bottom right corner. When you click participants, you should be able to find a hand raise icon next to your name if you'd like to ask a question out loud. Our next question in the Q&A is from Scott. Scott says, some of the strategic growth areas have not changed in land use designations. Example, Gordon, oh, it moved on me. Example, Gordon and Woolwich corridors. Were these considered for the mixed-use corridor designations 1 and 2? And if not, why?
James, I can take this one. So within some of our strategic growth areas, we haven't proposed land use designation changes, but there are policy changes with respect to some of the heights and densities that will apply to those designations. And with respect to the second part of the question here around the mixed-use corridor designations, so our mixed-use corridor designations only apply to the Silver Creek corridor, Aramosa Road corridor, and Woolwich Street corridor, and Stone Road as well. The mixed-use corridor 1 designations generally apply to the majority of our mixed-use corridor designations, except for some of the smaller parcels along the Woolwich Street mixed-use corridor and on Aramosa mixed-use corridor 1, or mixed-use corridor as well. But we didn't consider redesignating any additional lands as mixed-use corridor 1 or mixed-use corridor 2 that weren't already designated as mixed-use corridor.
Great, thanks, Jason. Our next question comes from Teresa. Teresa requests, can you please go over the residential density definitions again? Specifically, review the changes being made from existing definitions.
I think this might be helpful if I pull up the slide showing. So. Let me just share my screen again. Is it showing? Can you?
Yep, we can see it, Jason.
Okay, I'm just gonna scroll back. So I think this slide would be helpful. So again, the commercial mixed-use center designations currently permits 10 stories, and we're recommending that 10 stories continue through the designation, except up to 14 stories within commercial mixed-use centers within the strategic growth areas. And the densities are also recommended to be increased from 150 units per hectare to 250 units per hectare. For mixed-use corridor 1, formerly mixed-use corridor, currently permits 6 stories, and we're recommending to allow up to 10 stories or 14 stories within the Silver Creek and Stone Road strategic growth areas. And currently, the mixed-use corridor designation allows up to 150 units per hectare, and we're recommending that continue, except for within the Silver Creek and Stone Road strategic growth areas, where we're proposing to allow for a maximum of 250 units per hectare. Now, within our mixed-use corridor 2 designation, again, that's those smaller properties within the Woolwich Street mixed-use corridor and the Aramosa Road mixed-use corridor. We're proposing to keep the permissions the same for height and density. Within our high-density residential designation, we're proposing to maintain the maximum stories at 10. And same with the maximum densities, we're proposing to maintain that at 150 units per hectare, except where high-density residential falls within a strategic growth area. We're proposing to allow for a maximum of 250 units per hectare. And our low-density residential designation currently permits 3 stories or up to 6 stories with bonusing, but since we can no longer allow for bonusing, we are recommending that the maximum height within low-density residential be 3 stories. And currently, low density residential within our built up area allows for up to 35 units per hectare, or 100 units per hectare with bonusing along some of our major roads. And we're proposing to maintain that maximum density at 35 units per hectare, except along arterial roads where we're proposing to allow as of right up to 60 units per hectare. And within this low density residential designation in our greenfield areas, previously it allowed for up to 6 stories, and now we're proposing to allow for a maximum of 4 stories within the low density residential in our greenfield areas, and currently allows up to 60 units per hectare or 100 units per hectare with bonusing. And with the removal of those bonusing provisions, we're proposing to maintain the maximum density at 60 units per hectare within our greenfield areas. I hope that helped.
That's great, Jason. I see there's a quick follow-up from Teresa. Was just around, are there any changes to medium density? And hopefully, Teresa, that answered your question on the other aspects.
The only changes to medium density would be the removal of any bonusing provisions within the official plan. That would be the only changes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. Teresa, if there's other questions, feel free to let us know. We have one other one here. So the official plan review policy paper, specifically section 11.2.1, essentially recommends removing reference to Heritage Guelph from the official plan. And with respect, the rationale stated for doing so makes no sense to me. So I see nothing in the draft OPA 80 implementing that recommendation. And the question is whether that suggestion that Heritage Guelph should be deleted has been abandoned, or whether that still remains.
Okay, so I can respond to that one. Our staff report to council, which is now available on our website, does provide some updated information around the scope of Official Plan Amendment 80. We have removed the review of the cultural heritage section of the official plan from this review. It was added in to the policy paper, but was not considered as part of our overall scope at the beginning of the OP review. So we have paused the review of the cultural heritage policy section, and that will be picked up in phase 2 of the official plan review. So the considerations that were put forward in the policy paper will continue, but be deferred into phase 2.
Great, thanks, Melissa. We have another question in the Q&A from Morgan. With all this increase in densities across areas of the city that are already park poor, how will green space be addressed for the new residents?
So the city is currently updating its parks and open space master plan. I may have the title of that incorrect. I may need Melissa to help with that title. And that's currently looking into some of those issues where we're looking to increase density and how we can help achieve green spaces within some of those more higher density areas. It will help address some of those issues.
And just following up on what Jason has provided, the second phase of our official plan review will look at our parks policies, and that will follow the approval of the parks master plan.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Hopefully that answers the question about green space. Another question from Scott. So how will this OPA affect the review and timing of the comprehensive zoning bylaw?
Yes, it is. It is a strange time to be reviewing an official plan and our zoning bylaw at the same time. However, we did contemplate that as we initiated both projects. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw review will not be affected by this official plan review. It's still moving forward. And we are looking to host a public meeting and release the draft of the zoning bylaw mid-year. So there is no effect on the timing of that project.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melissa. I'm just looking to see if there's any more in the chat. Or if there's other hands that come up. Just a few notes from folks saying that was helpful. Thank you, which is great. And a thank you to city staff for adding and recognizing estate residential land use. Just give it another moment or two, see if any. Okay, I think, Jason, as we just can see if any others pop in, but could you put the last slide up? I'll just like to review for folks where they can share their thoughts, read a little bit more if you'd like. So there is the guelph.ca/official plan where you can find the information about the OPA. Have Your Say Guelph.ca is where you can also read a little bit more, find resources, and there is a survey available on Have Your Say to just collect some of your thoughts on these changes within the official plan. It doesn't take too much time to complete, but it would be very helpful for the city team to have that feedback if there are things in the changes that you like or would like to see differently. That would be great. And then of course there's the plan 2051@guelph.ca email that you can reach out to the team. And if there are other questions that come through, you're welcome to share them through those connections. So I didn't see any other ones come through. So I think with that, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who joined us this evening, whether that was through the live stream or in our meeting this evening. And I'll pass it to Jason and Melissa, maybe to say last words before we wrap for the evening.
I just want to thank everyone for participating tonight and for submitting your questions. And if anything comes up, please reach out through email or through Have Your Say and provide some comments or questions. And please fill out that survey. We are really looking for your feedback and input on this as well.
And I would like to echo the thank you for attending our open house this evening and remind you that we do have the public meeting of City Council on March 30th. You can register to be a delegate by emailing clerks@guelph.ca, and there's more information about that meeting on Have Your Say. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.